and then I'll hand over to the Minister to address you. It is now 4 months, exactly 4 months, since the board was inaugurated on the 3rd of November 2017. And it would be wrong for me if I don't mention the fact that when some of us were invited to serve on the board of South African Airways, we had a view of South African Airways. The view of South African Airways that we had was not even 10% complete and correct and accurate. In the 4 months, we in South Africa we have discovered a few things as a board. The first thing that I would like to make comments on is the whole situation around governance. We came here and found that there had been lack of board cohesion, which undermined the strategy implementation. There had been 3 strategy documents that were prepared, and when you went through the strategy documents, we found that there was nothing wrong with the strategy documents, but definitely there may have been serious problems of cohesion that existed with the board. We have had to work very hard to make sure that the board knows itself, knows its role, knows its function, knows how far it can go, and not to interfere in the executive functioning of the organization. Because when you do that as a board member, you then traverse into an era which gives the executives an opportunity to own all the successes that happen in the organization. And then, of course, they will blame the board for all the problems that happen in the organization. We have had to work hard in the last 4 months to make sure that we do that, and we will continue to allow the executives to do what they are good at. The second thing that we have discovered as a board was that South African Airways had a serious debt burden. As we see it, South African Airways is overgeared. Unless the capital structure of this organization is reviewed, the debt burden will undermine any strategy to financial sustainability of the airline. With the best intentions, with the best strategy, with the work that we know should be done, without dealing head-on with that debt burden, it will undermine our efforts. The third thing that we've discovered in the last 4 months is the serious lack of executive capacity. Over the years, South African Airways has been denuded of the skills and the capacity that the organization needs, particularly at an ESCO level. There is a leadership instability at ESCO. We have a number of people who have been sitting in those positions, acting for a number of years, and therefore, it does explain why it was not going to be possible to implement any strategy that would have come out. And we are addressing that issue. And if you want to raise the question as to how the CEO and the board is doing that, raise a question to the CEO, and he will be able to deal with that issue in particular. The fourth thing that we have done as a new board is to look at what is wrong, what are the shortcomings of the strategies that we have found. The strategy might be very sound, but if it does not have commercial sustainability and sustenance, which is what we discovered. And that explains, by the way, why it has taken us a long time to produce the corporate strategy that was required to have been given to the minister as early as January this year. We have had to work seriously to look at that strategy. The fifth thing that we have discovered is a lack of critical skills, particularly in the areas of commercial skills, financial skills, and supply chain management skills. And we are doing everything we can to make sure that those skills are brought into the organization. Otherwise, we will not be able to deliver on our corporate strategy as now presented to the minister. Supply chain challenges are very, very serious. We live in an era of and in an organization which is a state enterprise organization where supply chain is also part and parcel of the PFMA. I said to the minister this morning when we had our closed session just before the AGM, that if you want to look at South African Airways, look at a hospital and say, this hospital has at the extreme end the casualty ward where everybody is admitted, and then you move through the hospital and you get towards the end of the hospital where you find the high care unit, ICU, and unfortunately in the history of the healthcare industry, they have not created the ward that we find ourselves in, because we find ourselves not just at ICU, but we found ourselves in a ward that is next door to the morgue. Just this thing to die and then you open the door and move it to the morgue. And that's what we found. And therefore, the strategy that we have been working hard at is to make sure that we move away from that ward next to the morgue, but we move into a situation where we can take this organization into a very serious organization, take it back to its historical glory of being the icon of aviation in Africa. And we are committed to doing that as a board. The board has a variety of skills that can be able to take us there. Aviation skills are found in the board. Number skills are found in the board. Running organization is found in the board. Turning around sick organization is found in the board. And we're working flat out to make sure that that is achieved. We also found an organizational culture where, because you know that you have a daddy, and the daddy have deep pockets, therefore you can afford to take the car and crash it because daddy is going to buy you another car. And if you get into trouble, daddy will come there and bail you out. That's an unfortunate culture in an organization, and if that kind of culture has been in existence for quite some time, to turn around this thing, to make it realize that you have no daddy with deep pockets, you are on your own in this Africa, it's not an easy task. So the chief executive is engaging with all levels of the organization to make sure that this culture is turned around. We will define the kind of culture that we want at South African Airways, together with our own internal stakeholders, to make sure that there is serious buy-in of that new model of the organization. Ladies and gentlemen, I've given you negative stuff, and you might leave here wanting to take your handkerchief and wipe your tears. Let me just assure you of this. South African Airways is a strong airline. The aeroplanes will continue to fly. Martin, sitting over there, will continue to make sure that HFs supply food into these airlines. And SAT will continue to make sure that the technical nature and the technical health of our metal is healthy. We will continue to maintain our safety record, which is a world-renowned safety record. Bad as things are, South African Airways remains a very strong business, which is why, Minister, when I said to you, we are back from the brink, we have started the journey back from the brink, and we're going to make sure that this thing becomes a healthy organization. And I'm not going to say to the members of the press, I implore you and plead with you to give us time, because I know in your own sense of responsibility and loyalty to South Africa, you are going to do exactly that. Because let me assure you, whilst we are on this hard journey to be burying in our ankles negative sentiments that is being peddled in the marketplace, doesn't help this organization. It takes our eye off the ball. But we are not saying don't put us on our feet. Let us be agile and run, because we know you are there. But please talk to the CEO. Talk to me even if there's something you want to say about SAA. Allow me, ladies and gentlemen, Minister, to now introduce your minister to ask your minister to address you. Your minister doesn't need any introduction. I know in government that's what people do, but if you don't know who this minister is, maybe you don't have any right to be in South Africa. Thank you. Please, Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. That's not fair. You can't send people away for not knowing some of the citizens. Thank you again, and thanks, Clary, for facilitating. You know, having just returned from sabbatical, it is indeed my singular honor to address, you know, this august gathering. I don't know whether I can use all those words, because I'm no longer used to addressing people. From where I come, I used to serve, and serve, you know, quite diligently. But Chairperson and the board, the Chief Executive and the Executive of SAA, and my fellow colleagues from the National Treasury as the shareholder representative, media houses present here, we have just emerged from our long overdue AGM. And as you know, that SAA has, over a number of years, experienced instability in management, both at board and executive level, which has largely resulted in the lack of implementation of various turnaround strategies that the chairman has referred to, thus contributing to a significant deterioration in its financial position. The new and strengthened SAA board has now revalidated the turnaround strategy and will now pursue aggressively, with the necessary urgency, the implementation of this turnaround strategy. Key initiatives in support of the turnaround plan will be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. So they will be smart. It is precisely as a result of the instability that I've referred to at SAA that the AGM takes place more than 18 months after the last AGM, which was in October 2016, if I'm not mistaken. Key enabling factors for sustainable implementation of its business plan include, among others, improving SAA's internal operating environment to achieve swift operational decision-making. This will involve tough decisions on the network and fleet plan. It will include reviewing loss-making routes, also reviewing the frequency of specific destinations as determined by the market trends. In undertaking this exercise, SAA and its subsidiaries will work towards an optimal alignment between the various routes network and the airlines best suited to operate it. Decisions will also be taken on code-sharing arrangements between SAA and other airlines to jointly operate specific routes. Ladies and gentlemen, the board has also been tasked with strengthening its internal controls and governance processes, including achieving greater coordination within the SAA group on turnaround initiatives. This is a necessary condition for the successful return of SAA to financial sustainability and viability within an acceptable time frame. Government, through the National Treasury, remains committed to supporting the SAA board and executive management in their efforts to ensure a sustainable turnaround of the financial performance and financial position of the airline. It is only when the SAA group achieves this level of financial strength that it can sustainably contribute towards achieving the goal identified in the National Development Plan, in particular as it relates to tourism and trade, both regionally and internationally. I want to take this opportunity to express my confidence in the new board, who claim to be new at 4 months, and I'm only 4 weeks in my job. I express our full confidence in the board and the chief executive and the exco and all dedicated staff members who have actually been at the airline and have ensured that we get to this point, even though there have been challenges. So, ladies and gentlemen, without answering questions you have not asked, I would want to end here and say that we are very encouraged with the new leadership. We have come out of this a board meeting, which is a reflection on the past more than anything, and as I call it, a review. We were taking a review, a mirror shot at what has happened, but we also have mapped the way forward, and we will be working together tirelessly to ensure that we succeed in the implementation of this turnaround strategy this time around. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to break away from the tradition and the convention. The Minister has time constraints, and for that reason, we are going to conduct our program slightly differently. As opposed to us getting into the presentation by the CEO, we will allow few moments for members of the media to ask the Minister questions that relate to him in his capacity as the shareholder representative, after which the Minister may at any point excuse himself from the proceedings and will then continue with the remainder of the program. I hope that makes sense. It's a simple logic. So could we do that if there are any questions directed at the Minister? It's not compulsory to ask questions. So this is how we are going to do it. As you usually do it, you identify yourself, the media house that you represent, and then you put your questions to the Minister. We'll start with you, Arabile, and then we'll come here. Any other hand? And then we'll go to you, sir. In that order, please. Thank you.
Good morning, Arabile Kumete from Bloomberg News. Minister, my question really is with regards to the state lenders. What reassurances have you given the lenders that you certainly won't be, let's just say, helping SAA with regards to government guarantees any more than you already have extended? And if that isn't the case, what then is SAA going to do to ensure that it no longer has to come to you for a bailout, considering that we don't have the funds for it? Thank you.
Thank you. Minister, should we do the first round as in a group of questions and then the Minister responds to them collectively? Is that okay, Minister? Okay. Now I'm directing. Thank you, Minister, for that. You, sir.
My name is Dise Tomutweling of Reuters News. I have a question from the shareholder. As a shareholder representative, Minister, what do you think will be the best way to cut SAA debt?
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Terence Cream, Engineering News. Minister, now that you've seen the validated strategy and tough decisions that it involves, when are we going to, as a public, start seeing these actions? And as a shareholder, when do you expect these actions to start materializing? And if these actions involve some downsizing of the staff component, what is your view of how the SAA should manage the engagement with the unions? Thanks.
Thank you. Minister?
Thank you. Thank you for the questions. The first is the issue with the lenders, Arabile. Indeed, you know, we are going to be working with the new leadership. This actually is just but one of those engagements. just making sure that we actually are able to go to the AGM was one of the concerns that I would imagine that the lenders were concerned, because if you are not able to meet basic requirements, just like having an AGM, all of those things, and this is where we are starting. We're starting from the basics, making sure that everything is in place, but also that we are going to be monitoring the implementation of the long-term turnaround strategy. The long-term turnaround strategy has its short-term implementable, and as I said, all of these are going to be specific, and they have been looked at. They're measurable, and they are all attainable, and they're relevant. And we would want to demonstrate the difference between, the difference between a turnaround strategy that has not worked and the one that has worked is only the commitment to its implementation. So you might have it, if it's not implemented, it's not worth the paper it's written on. If it's not implemented, there's no reason why we should even bother to actually even go out and raise resources in order to actually, because those resources would be going down the drain unless they are going into specific areas that have been identified to have an impact of turning the airline around. And I would imagine that when the chief executive speaks to you, he will actually go into detail with some of those areas where we are saying, I don't want to to steal the thunder from the chief executive, but it would be interesting just to listen to what has actually been put forward and what we have actually as a shareholder been convinced that this is indeed a commitment that actually talks to making sure that we do turn around from past the ICU, as the chairman indicated, and indeed I don't see us going to the morgue anymore. So the lenders also will have to be convinced. So the first thing that the airline and the management had to do was first to convince us as the shareholder before you can even talk to the lenders. So the fact that we are now convinced that we are on the right path puts the airline in good stead to be able to talk to lenders with, of course, our backing. The best way to cut debt, again, we are going to be seeing there is a clear path that have been. We also want to be realistic in this space. You don't want to say you're going to wake up the following day without debt. The fact of the matter is that it's going to be a long and arduous journey, but it is a journey that with the commitment that we have seen, and also putting in place a proper team. One of the things that have emerged, I think the chairman also made mention of lack of capacity, and I remember that the deputy chair in our discussions, she said, perhaps we shouldn't be saying it's lack of capacity because you do have individuals that are supposed to do the job. Perhaps it should be lack of the capability, which actually goes again into the commitment of those individuals to do their job. And we're not talking about the rest of the staff. We're talking about a few people, and mainly at leadership positions, and it is for that reason that we're saying the difference between succeeding now and failing lies entirely in the leadership. And I'm convinced and confident that we do have that leadership, and with our support, this leadership will succeed. So cutting debt is going to be a tall order, and it is what we are committed to. Returning any enterprise into its financial sustainability or sustainable path requires that you actually do reduce debt in order to release resources to be able to execute your mandate. When are we going to see the implementation of the strategy? You are going to see that immediately, because we are beginning to implement. And when the chief executive talks to you, we'll be talking to you some of the initiatives that are already underway. And we're monitoring this very closely. There is already structures in place where the shareholder is also, without also blurring the lines between the shareholder and the company, where we are going to be playing a role of very close monitoring. We have set up an oversight structure that actually would be sitting quite regularly with some of the members of the board, some of the members of the executive, but also with some members also from the National Treasury, led by the Deputy Minister, who unfortunately is not with us today, but he's going to be playing an active role without blurring the lines. Let me emphasize that, because it's one thing we do not want to make, mistake one we don't want to make, of blurring the lines between the shareholder and the company. But we are going to see some of those, and I'm sure when the Chief Executive talks to you, he will be telling you exactly what those, where you will also be able. And I would also want to urge you to start, if you were not flying SAA, start flying SAA so that you really get the feel of what that means. If you have flown SAA before and you had some unhappiness, please do tell us, give us feedback also when you are beginning to see the difference, both in operations, but at the same time, when the time comes and when the board and the executive comes to report back to the nation, you will also see that also in the financial outcomes.
Thank you, Minister. Shall we take the second round of questions, if there is? Otherwise, we will. Okay. There's a hand there, Minister. Is there any other? After this round, we are going to pause on the question and answer. We are going to continue and proceed with the remainder of the program, after which, after the CEO will have presented, then we'll take more questions and answer. Thank you. Yes, Madam.
Antoinette Slavert from Moneyweb. Minister, is the plan in Cabinet at the moment for SAA to remain under the National Treasury, or is there a plan to move it to transport?
Thank you, Antoinette.
Thank you. As the chairman said, there are different doctors at different levels that would, so when a patient is in a particular ward, you bring in the specialists. When the specialists have completed their task, then it goes to the, you go back to the general ward. So that will all be determined by the progress we are making. And I do believe that, it is not the National Treasury's task to be managing state-owned entities. But we are also working with the new Minister of Public Enterprises on the broader strategy on all state-owned entities as to what it is that needs to be done. And we are doing everything humanly possible to make sure that all of them, we identify the key particular areas where they need attention, and we are going to be doing that, and we are beginning to do that. We already have put our dashboard, which tells us exactly which ones are at a particular ward and which ones are at a particular stage in their lives, and we are exercising utmost care in making sure also that all of them reach a point where they do the opposite of what they have done. Other than being a drain on the fiscus, we want them to go back to being the drivers of our economy and making sure that they contribute. There's nothing as painful as approving a resolution, and the chairperson knows what I said, approving a resolution that we are not going to be getting a dividend. We would want to wait down now the line and be receiving dividends from state-owned companies, but not only commercial and economic dividends. We want also to see social dividends where they begin to change the people's lives and begin to play their meaningful role in our economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to continue with the remainder of the program. I'm now inviting the CEO of SAA to take us through the presentation, which has 3 parts to it. It will be a reflection on the operational performance, financial performance, as well as strategy implementation as reviewed and refined. CEO.
Thank you very much, Daddy. Honorable Minister, Chairman of the Board, board members here present, members of the media, the lenders who are here, Rod as a lead banker, for the people who have been partners for SAA for a long time. We continue to engage on how we can find solutions to some of the challenges. I thank you for coming through. As Daddy has indicated, I'm going to walk you through, firstly, March 2017 numbers at a high level. I've got Nana with me. When we go to the question and answer stage, she will pick some of the questions. Then I'll also give a view of where we are with strategy, what's our thinking, and what we're doing in terms of implementation. I'll also talk a little bit as part of this in terms of the AG findings. Firstly, SAA is material in the economy. Many people would say that we're a bit cynical and fed up about SAA's history of loss making, but it's not as if SAA could disappear off the sky and nothing happens in the economy. Of course, there is an argument to say the market will address the gap, but there is always going to be a lag between that vis-a-vis getting the market to kick in and close the gap. So these are the kind of material aspects that we talk about. 31 billion rand revenue, 10,000 employees, 64 aircraft, 8 connecting destinations. So it's material in the air travel market in the continent and in South Africa in particular. Some of the market dynamics we're seeing in the market in terms of domestic, you will see the orange picture. So this is 2013, 2018 in the domestic market. You see that Mango has grown in terms of available seat capacity. SA has come down, but what's material is that the overall group has come down and there's been growth in other airlines. New airlines have come in largely low cost. That's in the domestic market. And you see in regional is rest of Africa, rest of the continent. Again, we have taken strain because more and more other airlines have taken capacity. What's really telling is in the international domain, where most of the Gulf carriers have taken the big part of the market share. We also believe that they have also helped grow the market. We think that had we got our own structures right, our own strategy right, that we would have grown, we would have taken a share of that growth. The story we're telling here is that there has been a significant reduction in the substance of SAA over a period of time, and that also translates itself in terms of what we see in the numbers and some of the challenges we see. We have to turn the tide, because the good thing is that the air travel market is not a pie of a fixed size, it's growing. Where there's growth and you're able to address your own strategy, you should pick part of the upside. If it was not growing, then you know to win, somebody must lose. We are not at that point in this market, which means there's still a lot of opportunity for a fit for the future SAA to be able to compete in the market and carve a space for itself under the sun. This slide talks about the history. Both the minister and the chair talks to the history of changes in leadership. We present the various CEOs, the chairs of the different boards, but the graph indicates the debt profile over a period of time, and we'll see on the red slide it talks about debt that matures within 1 year and it goes to 1.5 years and beyond 5 years. You see SAA started to have a burden of debt increasing significantly from 2012 onwards. It talks to the strategy and the model we should operate. As you would all know, that any business has got an optimal maximum debt capacity beyond which the debt becomes burdensome. I think the chairman did address this point. When you look at the strategy, and this slide is important in the context of the year on which we are reporting. The blue line talks about the long-term turnaround strategy of 2013, on which the results you are seeing today were based on. The black part of that line talks about what then actually transpired. What did we do? We said in 2013 that we were going to break even in 2016, but the execution went the other way around. So this is the history. And again, what the board also did was to put the strategy plan in 2017, and obviously, as we see today, the direction of the current strategy implemented is not tracking that trend, is going further down. This talks to the history of inability to implement strategy at SAA. Peter Davis and I, who is the Chief Restructuring Officer, have looked at all the strategies and we've found no fault, but perhaps focusing of the major commodities. What's been difficult at SA is to take that strategy and implement it aggressively. And this is what we'll address in the slides that's to come. Turning to the headline numbers, for March 2017, year ended March 2017, you would see revenue 30 billion rands, costs 33. I'll address this. Obviously, the net loss went to 5.6. We still carried 9.7 million passengers. Load factors at 7.5, not bad for an airline of this size. And again, the average fare combined for the group set about 3,517. When you go to the detail of the financial, what really sits underneath, you would see the big part is an operating cost. One of the things that you see there is what is called fair value translation, which talks to our exposure to assets that sits in foreign assets and liabilities. As the exchange rate moves, you gain and lose. There's about 1.9 billion rands of fair value translation. It's material for SAA. It's a IRS transaction or journal entry, but it's material because it moves the numbers by 1.9 billion rands. Having said so, there are still all other costs. Big part of it was revenue was flat, so we didn't achieve the growth that we needed. Costs increased by 11%, and in the increase in leasing in finance costs, as well as the fair value translation, 1.9 billion, which is material, and this is about exposure to foreign exchange movement. And all those numbers, aircraft maintenance increased by 17%. So the story of March 2017 is a story of flat revenue, not achieving growth. And I must say, Minister, that one of the key things that's important is the airline has a balanced revenue split, domestic and foreign exchange, foreign currency driven. We've got global sales agencies across the world. When the sentiment around SAA is negative, the global sales agents do not do forward bookings because they are not sure if the airline is going to exist. And therefore, your ability to acquire customers and generate revenue gets curtailed. So even with the best strategy execution, if the sentiment is negative, then obviously you are being constrained in terms of the chance to win, to fight and win in the market. This slide just breaks out the cost structure. As I indicate in the year, the fair value translation is a big part of the cost structure. To be honest with you, it does distort the actual performance because it doesn't reflect the actual underlying operational performance. If you carve out the 1.9 billion rands, you will see a different picture, but you'd have to normalize both sides because there was a gain in the previous year of about 555 million, so you would have to normalize. It would go down to about negative 300 million, but overall, it does distort the underlying performance in the year, but we still take that at the end of the day, we have to look at overall performance. This is how we reconcile the fair value translation. Then in the previous year, it was a gain, and this is how the accountants work, and a gain for us, and then overall, then because of the negative movement in the foreign exchange, and then we had the negative, it all comes to 1.9 billion rand. This is not to justify the fact that we made losses, but if you look at the underlying performance, it's not as bad as it projects on the overall number. I present here when I talk about the effect of the foreign exchange in a number of areas, you'll see that during that period of 2016, there was a deterioration of the rand against the dollar, which is a major currency on which SA trades, and that also finds itself into the numbers, especially in terms of the fair value translation. I will address some of the key issues on the Auditor General report. I must also say that AG, it was the first year they were auditing South African Airways, a choice that the board made to bring them in. The board accepts and management accepts the findings of the Auditor General. What they do, they give us another perspective in terms of what we need to do in SA in terms of transformation. They give us more granular details in other areas that would have taken us longer to look into. Some of the key things which are qualifying elements in terms of our report is property, aircraft and equipment, and I'll address quickly what some of the issues are there. Valuation of inventory, irregular and fruitless expenditure, and maintenance costs. If you look at the assets, talks about property and aircraft. So what we do in terms of valuation of aircraft, you either value the aircraft as a whole or you componentize it, because some of the components carry different life of their own. So because you can actually renew them, remodel them. So the AG has said that based on the standard, we need to componentize the valuation of the asset, and this is what we're going to do. Because when you get the report, you get a sense that we probably don't know the assets. That's not the case. It's how we apply the standard, and that's what the AG has said we must do, and this is what we're going to do. In terms of rotables, rotables are parts of the aircraft. When you have components, some components are perishable. You use it and you throw it away. Rotables are those parts of the aircraft that can be renewed. Their life can be restored. If you look at the car, the gearbox can get old. You bring it back and recondition it. It has life. So you have to track the asset in the aircraft as well as in the inventory. Managing that means that the 3 logistics systems that we have, MEMIS, AMOS, and SAP, must talk together. So we have to make sure that SAP does talk to the 2 logistics systems. As it is registered at SAP today, they are all lumped together to say you've got 400,000 rotables. They are worth 400 million. Then when you reconcile the 3 systems, that's where the AG feels we need to make sure it works. And the team is actually working hard on this, Minister and the Chair, to make sure we can address this. In terms of inventory, you have to value inventory. You need policy to do this so that you have the standard, so that the AG can come and say, here's the audit trail on the basis on which you actually valued your inventory. Whether it's the lower of cost or net realizable value, so you need to have the trail. And what we are doing now is to put the policy in place so that it's trackable on under what circumstances do you pick any of the valuation methods. And those are some of the things that the AG has helped us to realize. Maintenance costs, this is about accrual, making sure that the costs that were incurred in this term are actually accrued into the financials for the term in which they were incurred, and so that you're able to have the right view of the cost structure and the timing of that. So this is what is coming up. We have picked up just some of the high-level qualifying issues. So when you read the report at face value, you get a sense that this is a disaster. But actually the underlying substance says you need to improve how you record these things according to standard. And we have picked up an upside, a good view from the AG's insight, which will help us transform the business. So we welcome the report, and we are working very hard to actually deal with some of the issues. In terms of the irregular and fruitless expenditure, most of the irregular expenditure is largely because of poor contract management. So procuring on contract that has expired, and AG has flagged these things. And this is part of the history we have in SAA, and this is part of what we need to fix, and we're going to make sure we address that, because procurement is one of the key levers that this business has to actually make sure we can turn around and get to profitability. So, Minister, we're hard at work dealing with this. In terms of wasteful and fruitless expenditure, predominantly these are visa fines, as well as visa fines is when somebody flies out of Johannesburg International when his or her visa is not proper to actually be accepted in Turkey. So we take penalty for that. But what we do, we claw back for some of the agencies that do the work for us when we are being penalized. So this is going to be an ongoing thing of quality, making sure we hold people to account, and including our agencies that we pay to manage some of the processes. Obviously, some of the challenges around Brazil is onerous in terms of their claims. I will make the example, Chair, that Zooks tells me, he runs flight operations, that in Brazil, if the in-flight entertainment system, Minister, didn't work, the person doesn't only claim that piece on the flight to Sao Paulo, can claim emotional damage for not having seen the video. So these are some of the things that are coming through. Can I quickly, Chairman, address myself to the corporate plan? I play back this slide deliberately because it actually sets the tone. If I summarize, in terms of the numbers, losses we have incurred, some of the contributing factors are not reflective of the underlying operational performance. There are some of the things like fair value translation that we have to do, and these are the things as a business must take on the chin. We have to manage. You can't choose what you like and take the upside and not take the downside. But it's important for the analyst to look at the underlying performance of the business. What are some of the contributing factors to success, or rather poor performance? When we look at this slide, there's a path that says by 2020 we'll break even. This is the minister, the strategy the board the chair was referring to. So we've looked at the strategy, we have remodeled it. It's clear the lenders had said to me, I must sign on 1 November that I will execute on the strategy. And I asked Rod, I said, give me about 2 months to understand what the strategy is about. So 2 months later, I realized that there were fundamental gaps in the strategy. Focus of the crude oil price in the strategy, the focus was, and I shared this because it's important that we have the narrative because these things will continue to come up. We had focuses that the crude oil will peak at $55 a barrel by 2023. By the time I got here, Minister, this thing was already at $60 a barrel. When you remodel then the strategy like that, it says you will not break even for 5 years. And that's why it took us longer to reconstruct the strategy. And I started seeing the banks last week after we had a degree of comfort that we have a robust plan that's fit for the future. We have looked at the barrel of oil. Some of the natural hedges that we found in the market is that we believe that fracking, in terms of research, starts being viable in the US once the barrel of oil hits 70. Its economics becomes better, so you have a natural hedge against OPEC at some point. So you have to look at some of those instruments as you do the planning, because in terms of focusing, it's important to look at what are some of the protections you have. In terms of what happened, and I'm kind of giving a view of the year we're in, we had made certain assumptions on this strategy. We said fuel, and there were certain other things that had to be done. Some of the assumptions were around sale of aircraft, investment in capex, 13 billion rand capitalization over 3 years, and the shoulder came through. They gave us 10 billion rands. But also, in terms of what we needed to do, 5 wide-bodies aircraft needed to come out of the domestic market. These are 4-engine aircraft flying to Cape Town. You never make money out of them unless you have an opportunity to have a rotation with cargo. So, but on normal frequencies, you will lose money. You have to retain narrow bodies, reduce freighter network, procurement benefits, really restructuring procurement to make sure you get benefits of your procurement spend, Central Africa routes rationalization. So the black field circle means it's done. The ones that are empty means it's not done. And there are reasons why these things were not done. Some of them are around solvency and liquidity concerns, but the point is that where we are, we did not execute on those strategies. And this is the point we make about capacity to execute the strategy for SAA as a single strategic advantage that we need to make sure we commit to. Obviously, there were key trends in the market, like, for example, the Joburg bypass. Gulf carriers are siphoning traffic from Zambia, Angola, Mozambique, but also people are going to Durban Strait, are also going to Cape Town. Cape Town has become very material for any of us to continue to ignore. So you've got a Joburg hub strategy that's significantly been undermined. And choices are, do you stay with that strategy, or do you have a balanced strategy where Cape Town becomes a choice, a part of your hub strategy? So these are strategic options that we're walking through as we have just gotten here 4 months ago. But there are some quick wins that we have implemented, and I'm not going to read the whole text. For example, in terms of route optimization and capacity management, I'll show you some green shoots of the strategy. We have had to manage the capacity in the domestic market. If almost all your domestic routes are negative at the gross profit margin level, then you have a significant challenge of a direct expenditure, direct costs, but also you probably have a problem with the market, or the way you address the market is wrong. So that's why we have said in the stable we've got Mango for low-cost airline, as well as SAA as a full-service carrier. What we have been doing is to make SAA everything to everyone, and therefore your average fare is not right. The customer experience, because you are catering for everyone, you're competing with Mango, Surf Air, Kulula. That's not the market we should compete with full service carrier. We've got Mango to compete at that level. So what we have done is to manage use segmentation, make sure that SAA focuses on the segment for which it's made for, and Mango takes the bigger part of the growth segment based on what you see as a growth in the market. LCC are picking up most of the growth. So those are some of the market initiatives, market-facing initiatives we have implemented. We have announced that London, we are going to pull out the second frequency, Joburg Heathrow, and this is purely around loss making. If you have got a route that has been making making losses for decades, and you cannot be able to find a good strategy to turn it around, you have to cut your losses and focus on what you can work with. Many people have asked me the question, say BA is increasing frequencies. Is your strategy of pulling out of cutting frequencies in London correct? London is a one world hub. We're in the Star Alliance. What you see coming to South Africa are not necessarily people coming out of Britain. They get fed from Ireland, from Europe through cheap flights, and they get aggregated in Heathrow and they come. So I have no such capability in London because I have no partners. The only effort I have are people who are loyal to the brand, plus also the effort of the people of SAA working in the UK to actually make sure that people choose us ahead. We've put a new aircraft to make sure that we can compete with a good product against PA, and that second frequency pulls out of the market on the 18th of April, and we're quite comfortable that once we consolidate in one flight, we should be able to run London profitable, and that's how we've done the modeling. High level, I've just shared what are the initiatives we've done. So within 4 months, we've taken bold decision in the market. I hope it gives a sense of the willingness and the boldness of this board to make hard decisions. And this is not like a domestic market that's not been profitable yesterday. It's decades. So, but there hasn't been the will to address it. I know it's a bit uncomfortable because customers want to fly every 15 minutes to Cape Town. But if you do so, then you run a charity organization. A business must manage the market, and that's what we are trying to do. Minister, at high level, this summary of the key initiatives. I'm going to go very fast. We have to lead with customer experience as an airline. If you are not going to be big, size is out of your space because you are where you are. You're going to have to make sure that the flights you have are the customers choose you ahead of competition. And you can only do that through customer experience, service differentiation. And our cabin crew, flight deck crew, and the rest of the operations have to make sure this experience comes through. This is not just about the aircraft being new. Technology you can copy and benchmark, but a source of sustainable competitive advantage is service. And you can actually deliver that, bringing the uniqueness of African hospitality on board our flight. So I want the London route to be the most selected one, to be the first choice of everyone ahead of the 3 from BA. That's going to be service-based model. We want to lead in we have to continue to lead in the domestic market, but we want to lead profitable. It's one thing to lead in capacity when you are not making money. We want to be profitable. A regional player of substance, commercial JVs, code shares. The minister spoke about this. We need friends and family from all over the world to work with us, but in a manner that enhances us. We don't want to be used hands and feet. A focused player in the international market. I say to the team, in boxing, you don't choose which belt to fight, you get born into a division. We are lightweight, we need to accept it, but we want to be the champion of the lightweight division by excelling with customer service. A commercially focused organization, and all enabled by efficient operating platform, deep aviation skills, fit for purpose operating model, enabling policy environment, again, appropriate balance sheet position. When we talk about the operating model, we have to reshape the airline to really, really focus on commercial execution. The P&L accountability must be a lot more clear. It's too high up. It has to be in the domestic market, in the international market, as well as in the regional market. So I'm not going to go through detail. We are implementing this through a model of arrest, change, stabilize, and grow. We have to arrest the decline first. Some of the urgent interventions we're doing in the market are meant to arrest the decline so that we don't dig ourselves deeper into the hole. And part of it is to drive change, stabilize. And these steps are not necessarily in chronological order. They are interwoven. But we have to illustrate them. And underneath each area, We've got initiatives, short-term, long-term, medium and long-term, and this is where we talk about these initiatives, what we are going to do. So this is a demonstration of, these are not just slideware, there's an implementation model that is behind this, where we're saying revenue optimization, focus on direct expenditure reduction as a next step, focus on fixed costs, really continue the balance sheet restructuring, and these are not necessarily in sequence. So what we are running with is it's a complete change driven through the Change Hub, and I'm going to show you some of the green shoots of the results. We have a Change Hub. Peter Davis, who's the restructuring officer, is running a change organization where all the efforts and contributions come together there in the first floor. We've got people from throughout the business working hard on this. If there is any illustration of the intent to implement the strategy, Minister, there's no greater one than that. We have dedicated people. We track, we've got over 400 initiatives already in play. This is the kind of the early results of what we're doing in the market. And I know it's a bit of an eye test. And it talks to the revenue per available seat capacity, seat kilometer. When you see green, you're starting to see green shoots of positive. When it's red, it talks to reduction in capacity because we've moved aircraft to Mango. But you're starting to see the average fare increasing. You're starting to see load factors increasing as well. So what it means, what we are doing in the market, in managing the market, balancing the market between ourselves and Mango, some of the results are starting to come through. This is only the February results. What I've learned, Chair, is that in this business, it takes you 3 months from the decision, from the day you make a decision to implementation. Because you're going to change the network, you need to take care of the forward bookings. Then once you hit your 3 months, it takes 3 months to start to see the results because you must push your marketing effort. We're seeing this without any push in the marketing effort because of some of the challenges we have in terms of cash. I'm not going to go through all the details. I'm showing this as evidence that the things we are doing are starting to give us green shoots, but it's early days to report and go and celebrate success. I'm not going to spend time. This is about how the seat capacity has moved between us and Mango. This is the break-even slide. We are saying in our plan, there's a date in the future where this business should be able to pay for its own operations. I know the lenders, they want a path to debt reduction. Initially, Rod, you wanted a path to sustainability. This is the path, and this path is robust. We have agreed that the lenders can plug into our system and test the financial model behind these numbers. But also, the path to debt reduction is what is being addressed through the joint oversight forum that the minister set up, chaired by the Deputy Finance Minister and the chair of the Finance Committee of the board. The operating model focus on domestic, regional, international, P&L responsibility. You bring it closer home, make sure that route profitability, commercial decisions are made at the region and domestic level, while still keeping the whole network balance. The minister did highlight this. So this is what we are going to do. The design of the organs is going to be based on this. The final structure, Fit for the Future SA, will respond to this kind of model. It's easy to go and say you're going to cut heads by 10%. But if you do that willy-nilly, the heads come back again. But if you have an operating model, you know what skill you want, how many people you need, then you make it robust so that you don't restructure in the next 5 to 10 years. This is the model. It's my last slide that we're operating with, Change Hub. This is driven by Peter Davis and his team. We work together. The whole organization is being energized to support the effort. Chair and the Minister, I guess in my presentation, I'm talking about some artifacts that shows that we're doing something about the strategy and proof points of the infrastructure and models we're putting in place to make sure some of the harder issues around supply chain gains, fixed cost optimization, we are showing that we're doing some work there. I would like to thank the opportunity to present. I may have taken a bit longer. I must say I'm passionate about the stuff, so that's why maybe I may have taken longer than I should have. I would like to leave it there, Daddy.
Thank you, CEO, for the presentation. And we thank the Minister for gracing us with his attendance here. It seems the Minister is about to leave. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to proceed with the remainder of the program. We are now getting into the question and answer session. You may have a few questions. I think the presentation was crystal clear. It's as clear as a bell. So they may not be too many questions. All the same, we are going to grant members of the media an opportunity to raise questions if they have some questions. And whilst at the DIF, I could just allay your fears and concerns, we are going to make some information and documentation available to you, including the presentation as well as the media statement, so that you read the statement in conjunction with the presentation, because the presentation on its own, it might seem to others to come across as if it's Latin or Greek. I don't know between the two languages which one is more challenging. All the same, let's get into the Q&A. I don't think I want to start with Arabile. If Arabile is the first, okay, I am going to start right at the back. There's a lady right at the back there. Any other show of hands at the back? The lady will be the first one. Arabile will be the second one. And I still with Reuters. And Reuters will be number 3, and you'll be number 4. That will be the first round of questions in that order, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Jana Kirschhoff from Sanlam. Can you give us some color on your current liquidity position? So bank balance as of today and available facilities. And the question really relates to some of your partners, notably SA Express, and the ability to actually remit some of the funds that is due to them through your booking system. Thank you.
Thank you. Arabile?
Again, Arabile Kumete from Bloomberg News. My question just relates then to the integration or selling then of your other airlines. How far are you with regards to that process? The second thing is you say as well, and I think it's slide 20 of the presentation, that you have spoken to lenders regarding, or you have approached potential lenders to support financing requirements. Please do, if you could share some detail with regards to what those financing requirements are, and how much exactly it is that you've asked potential lenders for. Thank you.
Thank you. Reuters and Creamer Media.
Okay, this is Omtwening of Reuters. Just a question on costs. What ideas are on the table regarding cutting costs, and also how much are you targeting? How much do you hope to save?
Thank you.
Terence Creamer, Engineering News. Just on the fact that we're now a few days away from the end of your 2018 financial year, please could you give us some insight into what the figures look like relative to what you just presented now, as well as some of the concerns that were raised around your going concern status. And then secondly, when you are the champion of the lightweight division as SAA, what will you look like at that point? And what will, I think it links to the earlier question, what will the relationship be with SAX and Mango?
Thank you. I'll request the panel to respond. The Chair, CEO.
I think and we'll share the questions. I think the question from Sanlam, what I want to say is that I'm happy to take that question on a more direct engagement after this, but I want to also be clear and say, when you have a business that is making losses, has not broken even, that's why we are here. You need credit line from the banks, you need a shareholder to give you money to operate. So if the two things have not come through, as you would know, we are talking if those things have not come through, so what you then do, you go and adopt the normal way of doing business. You work with your suppliers, you negotiate payment terms, you do all those things. That's what we are doing. So with regards to the SA Express conversation, we are in conversation with them. And I think there's some facts I want to deal with not in this forum. But if the answer is, are we liquid, do we have cash to run everything? Our revenues do not cover all our operating requirements. That's why you see a picture like this. To do so, you need a working capital requirements. It can come from two sources if you are not yet broken even. Either your shareholder continues to support you with working capital requirements, or you've got lenders who want to partner with you, who see the future. And that's what we're engaging with the lenders, with the shareholder. So the answer is, we're using the traditional instrument of running a business. And even when you are profitable, it's part of the strategy of any business to work on supplier payment terms. But I hope it gives you a view. But the express pointed question, we can take it offline. I think the issue around selling assets, how we reorganize the business, the shareholders indicated much earlier that SAA must find a strategic equity partner. The view of the board is that that is probably far out in terms of timing, because we do not believe that a strategic equity partner will come into a business that is having challenges. We need to first transform SAA. Our view that that's probably two to 3 years out before we can really start saying it's really material. However, it does not mean that the board would not look at some of the non-core assets and make decisions around that. And as we move forward with the strategy we're starting to implement, then all those things will come out of the, to be more visible. Obviously, the shareholder is key to this, because we're acting on behalf of the shareholder in terms of implementing the strategy. In terms of cutting costs, you want to take it?
In terms of cutting costs, we are looking at a number of things. We have been cutting costs, but we have to be also mindful that we don't cut costs to the extent that we cripple operations. Some of the issues that we're looking at is less operation of wide-body aircraft on the domestic market, because that is very expensive. So we're focusing on using more the narrow-body aircraft on domestic flights, and that will save a lot on operating costs of the. Another, just to add on to the liquidity issue, with the return of some of the narrow-body aircraft, there is actually rotables that are part or are specific to those aircraft. So one of the things that we're looking at is freeing up the capital that is locked up in those rotables that are for the narrow-body aircraft. So that way we are going to generate more capital.
Yeah, I think in the forward-looking picture, so obviously you have to have a fit for the future airline where everyone is a contributor, is really gainfully employed, really highly skilled, executing on the strategy. You need to optimize your route network so that you actually make sure that almost every flight you fly is profitable on average. It's important, so which means the industrial platform for productivity from a revenue and profitability point of view. Again, you have to look at your supply chain. That's where the biggest pools of opportunities sits. So you have to, I do not want to buy anything at R1 more than a competitor gets. And that talks about the new culture, the new ethos, a new way of doing things where we become very aggressive in the market using our buying power and scale. So these are the kind of levers we've got to actually make sure we can bring the strategy into fruition. There were, Chair Owl and the Deputy Chair, there were points that you raised about insights into the future. It's always very difficult because this AGM is going to come. I do think, though, that if you look at the slides on strategy and gaps in implementation, it should be telling to say we do have, it's a kind of a similar story broadly. I think we can be quite open about that. If you look at the slide, the red and the blue slide, things only happen when we are deliberate in making change. Now we're coming in November, last quarter, so we're trying to really pull through everything. Without giving guidance further than I should, I think we just need to manage the expectation that if we haven't done things that should have happened at SAA did not happen. Things that ought not to have happened, they happened. So as a result, you get then poor performance. So we're focusing on resetting the strategy moving forward. That's what we're doing. I think we want to put more reliance on the new plan. In terms of the structure of SAA, it's always going to be a portfolio-based approach. I think mango will continue to be important in the domestic market because that's where we see the growth coming from. The view we hold is that in the international domain, it has to be a very focused airline that really, really leads with customer experience. Because if you do so and you're able to get the preference of customers, you can be able to command price premium even when you are subscale. And that talks about the new ethos, how we engage with customers, how we bring digital into play, how do we make sure that our cabin crew understands beyond just traditional scripting, allowing them a bit of flexibility in terms of how they engage the customer. And we're having this conversation yesterday with Zux, who runs operations, to say we need to build a new ethos of how we build the new airline. So very, very specific on service in the continent, JVs, our own metal. Mango remains very important and strategic to us in terms of the domestic market. I shall give the chair to perhaps summarize on the deputy chair to summarize some of the points. Are you okay?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think the strategy is pretty straightforward. We really are quite clear on the specific areas that we need to focus our actions on. And both the CE and the board are going to be working flat out to make sure that the strategy that we have produced does gain traction, not today, but yesterday. And we, as the CE was beginning to indicate the green shoots that we're seeing, we definitely are going to go there. We will be hamstrung by liquidity, but we are addressing the issue of liquidity. And we need to get on top of that issue. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult to implement the strategy.
Madam? Oh, okay. The second round of questions, and depending on the appetite, this may very well be the last. I see one hand here. Is there any other? None. Madam?
So are we going to get a full set of the 2017 results? Because you actually gave us very few numbers. Also the segmental analysis or the subsidiaries, are we going to get that as well? And when will the annual report be available?
Thank you.
The integrated report is actually part of the pack, so it is available. It will be made available.
Thank you, Madam CFO. Any other questions? We are going to have to call it a day for now. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for being in attendance.
The latest that Mike's sitting